What's up, everyone? I've got my friend here, Travis, and we're going to talk about his favorite anime, isekai anime, and the likability of various anime in and outside the anime community. Travis?
Yeah, so excited to talk to you today and looking forward to sharing my thoughts on anime.
All right, so let's get into this first question. Who is your waifu, or at least who is the best girl and why?
Okay, this is definitely recency bias, but for anyone who's watched The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, I've got to say that Mahiru is definitely the best girl. I mean, that's absolutely what I think any guy would objectively say, like, yes, in an ideal situation, like, that's what I want in a wife.
Yeah, so it's so funny because he's been talking to me about watching this show, and I really did start it. I was planning on in the winter season. I was reminded that I saw this and I was like, oh, this is probably going to be a good romance show, so I should watch this. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just go ahead and watch the first episode. And I got halfway through it and I was like, I don't like this show.
It's so funny to me because I think most anime that has romance, like the romance is either, unreciprocated or just like super not acknowledged for a very long period of time. But this one seems to have like one of the healthiest portrayals of romance, even if it's sort of a slow burn, which it kind of shocks me that you're not into that with your interest in the romance genre.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing. So I do like romance anime, but in my opinion, I think that I watched the first episode, so I got that out of the way. But I just didn't really see much of where it was going, and I'm not saying I won't watch it. I probably will end up watching it.
Yeah.
Since it's just one season, so it's not that big of a deal for me, but I'm just not really in the mood per se right now to be watching romance anime. I feel like, there are some shows that I've been watching that kind of have, romance in them, like I Got a Cheat Skill. But that's not really my focus right now. I've kind of backed off of that just a little bit. I watched this show. It's called Hyoka, and it has a little bit of romance, just a tiny bit. These two characters that kind of like each other, but in reality, it's more about these mysteries and things. So I've been sort of taking a detour off.
Sure.
But, I definitely think... What were you going to say?
Yeah, I think Cheat Skills specifically is interesting because it's super not clear for most of the show, like, who the romantic interest is. And, like, you think you get it because of, like, the intro trailer. It's, like, clearly the girl with the black hair. I forget her name offhand.
Kaori,
Yeah. You think he's going to be with her, and then they introduce, like, 50,000 other female, like, protagonists, so you never know.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great anime, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Okay, so the girl from, Angel Spoils Me Rotten, that's your waifu, okay. I think she's good. I think she has, like you said, all of those qualities that you're looking for, and I think that's actually a really solid pick, in my opinion. For me, I just gotta have that spice, I'm talking about. I think Mizuhara, obviously, I've, beat this horse to death, but with everything that she has, I think she's a little bit more, ambitious than most, anime girls. And I think that there's a little bit of a, independence with her.
Right.
And I enjoy that because I think that makes her more than a one-dimensional character. And so I think that I really appreciate that fact. And so, I've already talked about my girl in a lot of other videos. So we'll skim over that one for me. But, okay, so this question, what was your first anime growing up?
Yeah, so it's funny because we're talking some today about, how anime has been received by the masses at large. But my first anime, it was either Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z, but I'm pretty sure it was Pokemon.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably close to me. See, one of my earliest memories is obviously Pokemon the cards. And so, oh man, my brother actually ripped up my Moltres card and threw it in the toilet. And so that was like one of my worst memories early on. And so, but a memory even earlier than that was one of my Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you remember Celtic Soldier.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's
so,
an OG.
I had that card and he ripped it in half, and my mom, she was like, "Oh, we'll just tape it back together." I'm like, "It's not the same.
It's not
anymore.
the same, Mom.
But it was just So I think that's probably I was no more than 4 or 5 years old, and so that was one of my first sort of memories about anything anime. So I think that would be my first one. But I mean, what was your impression? Like, did you know what anime was at the time, or what was that like for your first anime?
I feel like I did and didn't, right? Like, I understood that, like, oh, this is, like, a Japanese cartoon, but I didn't think of it as, like, I only went to watch anime. As a kid, wanted to watch cartoons, thought Pokemon was great, also really enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh!, collected the cards for both, liked Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and I think what stood out to me was that I felt the themes were more interesting than a lot of American cartoons at the time, and as a kid, obviously you're not going to articulate that, but it's more fun than like the slapstick humor of like Tom and Jerry, right? I was interested in like, oh man, Ash doesn't win all the time, and Goku isn't a perfect character, or terrible father, maybe, or like with Yu-Gi-Oh, like maybe there was some heart of the cards cheating going on, but they were all so much more interesting than the usual animated show protagonists you get.
That's an interesting point. That's what I always kind of think about when I think of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. I think Yu-Gi-Oh more so of like doing the right thing, even though like you might hurt you might take a hit, like you might have to sacrifice something, but if you're going to do it for your friend, you should do it for them, because protecting another person might be a bigger sort of, the greatest love you can have is to lay down your own life for another person. So,
Yeah, and what's so funny about Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically is, like, as an adult learning that, the show was a lot darker in Japan. Like, it's moderately wholesome or kidsy, like, in the U.S., because, if you get defeated, you go to the Shadow Realm, whatever that means. Well, you actually just die. Like, that's what happens. Dude mind crushed another character, meaning he killed the man, right? Like, you don't get that as a kid, and to some extent I'm thankful for that, but I think that would have changed the whole reception of the show in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. There's a lot of different, what we call censorship as far as anime in general. I mean, sometimes it would go as far as like the 4Kids dub would just like take out things that wouldn't even need being taken out, and there are like a lot of times that I remember that they would just block out entire episodes. Like there's one episode in you can't even find in America right now of the Indigo League of Pokemon. It's this show. I don't even know if you know.
Is it the one with the gun in it and the Tauros?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's one where like they go to some sort of type of safari type thing. It's not exactly the same thing, but like he pulls out a gun on them, and so like they took out that entire episode. So.
Yeah, it's funny because I think it's very much a product of the time. Like I think. Maybe in today's climate that would be more acceptable, but I want to say that, in the US especially, maybe some of the like satanic panic and like fear around, alternative culture really contributed to a lot of like what was happening then.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I never really thought about that. I know that was sort of a time where it was weird because it was new. It was like, I guess you could say, kind of, very different. And so America wanted to be able to put tight restraints on things so that kids would see only what, they wanted to see, especially with, I think that you made a good point in the satanic panic, but also a lot of people kind of harped on, they kind of attacked shows like The Simpsons. And so even that was, Bart doing things like saying, "Eat my shorts." Like that was literally the worst thing imaginable for 90s parents.
Oh yeah, my mom hated shows like that especially. And like she wasn't the type to like, oh, you can't watch all these shows, but I mean, she hated when my dad would watch something like that or even non-animated stuff that just had really kind of gross humor or like, the disrespectful child themes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying is like, that's such a great point because even nowadays we look back on the first season of Simpsons and it's just like anybody could watch this nowadays. I mean, you think about all the graphic material on Netflix now, and it's not even close to being as clean as I would say The Simpsons in retrospect is today. And I think that, that's just part of the culture and the way that, like you said, the way that sort of America and, kind of mass media perceived certain things at the time. I definitely think that that's kind of an interesting thing to see as far as like anime censorship goes. Did you have anything else on that?
Yeah, if anyone is interested, I would highly recommend just Googling or looking up on YouTube the sermon on Pokemon cards. It's just this really funny, like, viral video from the 90s of this guy, like, on stage at his mega church, like, talking about, all these Pokemon cards, they're so bad, they're of the devil. But then it gets, like, really weird because he's, like, just obsessively collecting them all. I'm like, I kind of question the authenticity of, like, your intentions here, sir. Like,
oh, wow, that's funny. That's kind of ironic.
Right.
He like, collects all of them, and that's funny.
Right, yeah, just so you can, use them as sermon material or something. But I think deep down we all know that he actually liked it.
Oh, man. That's funny. Wow. Yeah, y'all have to look that up. I think I might have heard of that before, but I kind of forgot if I knew about it. So, all right. So why do you think anime has grown to be mainstream? Okay, I think that's a good jumping point from that previous question.
It's funny because it almost happened out of nowhere. Wow. Like I would say in most people's minds, like especially those of us who grew up like as a fan of that stuff and who would have been made fun of that when we were in school, to now see it be mainstream is like, well, how did this happen? And I think part of it had to be just like a generation of younger siblings being exposed to the likes of Naruto or the big three that we as older siblings may have liked, and I'm gonna guess there's some correlation, and I can't prove this obviously, between like people who were into that and investment and family. Right? That's just pure speculation. You guys are welcome to shout out in the comments like, no, you're totally wrong for that. But I do think there's some correlation there and how we tend to share the things we like with those we care about most. And I think it's just a logical progression of like, those of us who grew up with Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, etc., as new shows came out like Naruto and, shows like Bleach and One Piece, continued their seemingly infinite arcs, it was possible to like share those with, our younger siblings who then grew up. And then because perhaps there were so many of them, there just wasn't that embarrassment. And I think too, just as the medium matured, people learned about it and learned that it wasn't this weird, like, gonna turn your kids into Satanists type thing, right? Like, anime had a lot of very relatable, very normal themes. And I think that led to it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good analysis and sort of a breakdown of how, certain things can be kind of blown out of proportion, because I think a lot of what that is people see certain things of anime and then they take that and they sort of extrapolate that and sort of kind of blow that out of proportion, where they'll say, oh, well, there's this one scene in this one show where this happened, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not that bad, but if you look at certain other shows like at the same time, the same sort of realm, it's like, okay, well, Naruto is actually like for like basically a little bit older kids, like 13 years old. And so that versus something that, Pokemon or whatever, I think that makes a huge difference. Is like, I think that sort of, I guess you could say sort of like bleeds over into the fact that, well, I think that Pokemon is good for kids, but not Naruto. It's like, yeah, but Naruto's for a little bit older age group,
And I would add on to that I think the other types of media contributed greatly. Like, there are so many people played the original Pokemon Red and Blue, right? Those games really transcended social circles, as did the card games. Like, it didn't matter if you were a jock or a nerd or whatever, social group you wanted to say you were a part of back in the 90s. Like, at one point, literally everyone collected Pokemon cards, and that was the norm. Like, I think most of us, like, you were telling a story earlier about, trauma relating to your cards being damaged or stolen. Like, I remember a kid on my school bus taking some of my cards and my parents, like, driving us over to this kid's family's house to, like, go get them back, right? And there are so many stories that I think a lot of us have about that time, where when my sister and brother-in-law picked up Pokemon Blue on behalf of my parents for me, and my brother-in-law was so excited about it, he just started the game for me, right? For my benefit, to make sure it was good, right? But I think it captured the interests of people that would never have sat down to watch an anime, but then suddenly realized, like, oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I definitely agree on that. That point where you have different mediums sort of getting people involved into anime versus, before that we didn't have Game Boys, we didn't have things like that. So, of course, no one was going to watch anime before that, but now we have, in the 90s, we sort of had that video games, we had... even different things like movies at the time. Like, if you think of Pokemon 2000, that was a movie that, came out as sort of a kid-friendly thing in America. And so seeing something on the big screen versus, seeing something sort of in passing on, cable or whatever, I think that maybe plays a role. But I think you're definitely hitting it right on the head as far as... that sort of those cards, and then also that Game Boy sort of shooting it up into mainstream.
And I think the movies is a really interesting point, because I think that contributed a lot in ways that maybe I wasn't thinking about.
Studio Ghibli.
Oh yeah, well, we can talk about them too, but I think specifically going back to Pokemon for a second, and Yu-Gi-Oh, they both were geniuses that when their movies came out, you got a card or a card pack by going to their early movies. And kids obviously love little toys like that. And so you saw the big corporations like Burger King and McDonald's go, oh, wait a minute, Happy Meal toys, right? Or we can have kids' toys that are relevant to what kids actually want. And then all of a sudden, it's everywhere. Like, people see Pokemon, they see Yu-Gi-Oh, they see Digimon, like that. All of that stuff is everywhere, and I, have to assume that helped to make it a little more normal in the eyes of, adults and older, right?
Yeah.
And so this isn't just something for kids. Our kids, as they grew up, then they wanted to, pass that interest down to their kids, and it's just continued.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that's a good point for sure. That sort of, I guess that's where capitalism is doing its thing, right? Like, giving the people what they want and making money off of it.
Oh, so, yeah.
But no, I think that's very unique perspective, because I know that, well, he's, Travis, a little bit older than me, so I guess he's been around the block. He knows a little bit more worldly things than I do. So, but yeah, I think that's a great perspective that I hadn't even really considered, because in my opinion, sort of my take on the whole mainstreaming of anime is, 2013 Attack on Titan. I think that, for a lot of people, anime was just like, even back then, it was still something you watched as a kid. Naruto, you were a kid. Bleach, you were a kid. You were watching that. Pokemon, and it maybe just you didn't grow up with it, Like, it kind of got left in the back. But then this thing called Attack on Titan that, I run into people on the street, and they're just like, they're wearing an Attack on Titan shirt, and I'm like, oh, you like anime? And they're like, what? What are you talking about? And I'm like, Attack on Titan, it's an anime? And they're like, oh, yeah, I like cartoons like that. And I'm like, okay. So it's like certain people, they will just watch anime now because it's just a show to them. Like, even, a famous comedian, what's his name? Bill Barr or whatever.
Bill Burr.
Yeah, Bill Burr. That's it. He was like, oh man, have you guys seen the show? It's called One Punch Man. It's hilarious. It's this guy who's like depressed because he defeats everyone in one punch and he's a hero. And so it's just things like that, and we see all the time celebrities and things, especially sports figures. They'll do like a Naruto jutsu symbol or something, or like a fighter will stand in Rock Lee's fighting stance, and it's just these things that sort of bleed into culture, and I think as well as sort of the mainstreaming of other quote unquote nerd culture things like superheroes, comic books, all these movies that are coming out with Robert Downey Jr. playing a superhero. I mean, that would have never been thought of 20 years ago,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I was trying to think were there any other super dark anime that were really popular before Attack on Titan?
Well, I mean, Death Note sort of had a holding, in 2008, but I don't think that the dub was really that present, and I think a lot of people sort of missed out on that. But I heard that was sort of a thing, for that. And as far as like dark anime, I'm trying to think, but
no, I think that's fair. Like I definitely remember, you can Google this as well, like news articles of like, the problem kid, being questioned in school for reading Death Note, or like, and adults not really understanding what that was. But then it feels like, really around the early 2010s, like all these, shows with really dark themes enter the mainstream. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say that, when did Game of Thrones start?
Yeah, no, it was pretty early. I would say you probably got close with the 2013, because I think that it wasn't probably too far off.
Yeah, I'm looking it up, and it looks like it released in around 2011. So, really, you have, I guess, 2008 when Iron Man comes out and kind of makes, cartoony style characters a little more popular for maybe mainstream audiences, and then you've got, Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead and all these shows that become super mainstream but are also super dark and gruesome, and that perhaps audiences in the past would never watch, but because of that moment in history became phenomena that people I remember in college, like, we would get together every time a new episode of Game of Thrones would come out, and I think the same became true for many people with shows like Attack on Titan, that before there wasn't really anything like that with that kind of mainstream mass appeal that was also super adulty, right? Like, a lot of times when people would want to share anime with their friends, they'd have to preface it of like, all right, anime can be a little weird sometimes. And this is the first one where it's like, yeah, you like Game of Thrones? Well, this is super dark too. Right?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I think that, Attack on Titan is Japan's Game of Thrones, and so I definitely like, I never thought about, sort of the live action culture influencing the anime culture, and the fact that people kind of, like you said, started giving a shot to these sort of darker live action shows, and that in turn, maybe brought them towards things like Attack on Titan anime that were sort of in the same realm, I would say. Okay, so if you could be in any isekai anime, which one and why?
Okay, I think my answer has changed on this over time. I think the first one I ever saw, and I don't think I ever understood the plot, nor do I think anyone does, was Dot Hack back in the day. I thought the premise was so interesting, even though as a kid I really didn't get it. But then, oh man, I'm blanking on the name now, but what's the uber popular Sword Art Online? Right? Yeah. That one I think would have been my answer for a long time, because I think it encapsulates like 90% of what people think about when they think about an isekai. Like, imagine if you could just somehow be transported to another world where there are actual table stakes, like things matter, and you like relationships matter, and oh, by the way, you're the hero. right that I think that's something that's really appealing to a lot of people, that you really get to see the main characters in that show like build relationships and level up. And okay, season 1, let's admit, if it just stopped there, it would have been probably one of the best shows of all time. And after that, it really became kind of cringe, and I won't deny that. But I think my answer now, having recently finished season 1 of Cheat Skill, I would say the Cheat Skill universe, specifically because it's the first one I've seen do a really good job of making both the character's life and the regular world and the alternative world actually matter and like impact one another. And I think that sounds really appealing because, like, selfishly, like, I like the relationships and the people that I know in this real world, and if there was a show where it's like, hey, well, you can have both, well, I mean, why not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I mean, obviously, I think, you know, I got a cheat skill in another life and became unrivaled in the real world too is my favorite, isekai anime ever. Because, like you were saying, I mean, you just pretty much got it all right. You know, the characters that he has in the real life actually matter, and then those people sort of, influence how he sees people in the other world, and then kind of vice versa. And also the skills that he learned mainly in the other world, but also kind of like the emotional skills he does in the real world influence the other world. So I think that one's pretty darn good, I would say. I think that the only other one that I like is it's a parody isekai. It's called Uncle from Another World. And so he wakes up in the real world and still has his powers from, the other world. And so I think that would be cool, So I think that maybe that one. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of like I Got a Cheat Skill as a whole, I would say?
Yeah, I would say it started off super strong. Like, I love the premise of a character who's valued for who they are on the inside and having to reconcile who they've become on the outside.
Right.
Like, he didn't just, immediately go, oh, all my past trauma, that doesn't matter. Like, it definitely stuck with him. And you saw his character act really weird in situations where maybe a different anime, he would have been totally cool with being a supermodel all of a sudden, right? Or totally cool with talking to the really pretty girl in the class. But he really struggles with that, and I find that to be a really interesting character. Now, where I think it gets interesting is I wonder if they almost have started having this problem of having too many characters you're supposed to care about. Because, kind of halfway into the season or so, kind of form this arc that they finish up about, well, his family, they were terrible to him. And then he comes around, and because of the changes he has experienced, chooses to forgive them in this critical moment where they could have died. And then the rest of the season, it kind of progresses a lot more in the other world. And they begin to tie the two together, but all of a sudden they keep introducing new character after new character after new character. And then I missed this the first time through. In the closing credits of the last episode, the new girl who tried to kill him and his master in the other world is just joining the class in the new world. And I really want to see, if possible, just more character development around some of the other characters and more development into what appears to be the main romance, because so far it's more of like, hey, he saved her 3 times, now he likes her, and they've hung out a few times, but there really hasn't been like a growing per se in the relationship other than just like those hero saves the day moments.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that see, here's the thing, it's like I honestly don't really mind that fact that they're introducing new characters, because in my personal opinion, I'm not too attached to like anyone, and so I don't think that I never really thought about it as far as they're kind of growing sort of this cast, and it's getting it's kind of spreading him a little bit too thin to sort of interact with everyone. But in my opinion, I still like it. I'm not saying that you don't, because I know that you do, but I'm saying that that sort of point is not really a big factor for me, because I think that he is really, like you said, he's really good at being genuine and honest. And so I think that my sort of thinking is that the way that he reacts to things and the way that he, goes through experiences, that's sort of the key and the core of the show. It's not really about these other characters that I'm sure that, if we kind of rounded up the cast and shortened it up a little bit, maybe we could get a little bit deeper into everyone else. And that would be fine, but I think the path that it's on right now is fine. I think that, you said that the girl entering the class at the end, I thought that was hilarious. I mean, for me, it's hit or miss about these anime things, that's why I think that certain shows like, there's this show called Mashal, Magic and Muscles, and it's, this guy who, like, he does these super wacky things, and it's like, sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses, and it's like, with Cheat Skill, it's just every single episode just seems to, like, make me laugh.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the appeal for me, is that I don't care about, sort of the very seriousness of the plot, because I know that it's not really about things being very serious. It's just there to tell a story, make you laugh, have a good time, and I finally enjoy an isekai because of that. Which, I mean, am I wrong or what?
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to get you into the isekai genre for a long time, but I think this is really, shaping up to be a really good show overall. Now, the light novel is only so far developed, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. I think my nervousness around adding so many characters is that you start to just create people who are only their trope. And even though that's a very anime thing, I think it somehow makes it less satisfying when the show starts out, like, really developing around this idea of, these complex themes of, like, forgiveness and, like, the changes that he's experienced. And I guess I'm just curious to see where the show goes from here. Like, does he develop anymore? Does it just become a kind of, like, less graphic Konosuba, where it's, like, kind of the fun cast of characters doing things together?
Yeah.
Any of those would be fine. I think I'm just curious to see where it goes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I see that. I definitely see that, but I think that, you're making that point of, like, oh, well, these characters, they don't get enough screen time, so they're going to start to be sort of one and done tropish things.
Yeah, like, is the princess just going to only say the same 5 sentences every time about,
will you marry
me today? Like,
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I think that it's how do I say? It's sort of a personal preference that I don't mind that, maybe. And so maybe this is just me finally sort of relenting to the isekai genre of, hey, I know that some characters, they're just not going to be well developed because they're not going to get enough screen time. Yeah. But I don't really mind. I think Lexia is the girl's name. That's the princess. I don't really mind her character. Like, I'm not too mad about whenever she says, will you marry me? Because I think that it's funny, and I think that it, maybe it'll wear off, maybe it'll develop into something else, but I think that I think that the creator is doing a good job on sort of, having fun with the series, but at the same time, like, actually doing something. Like, at the end, we get to see him fight one of the sort of people that have this vile power. Right. And so I think that honestly it could go on for like 10 seasons. If they wanted to, they could build out this sort of world and sort of keep things going. But that's the thing about anime, is that I think that you can most of the time, you can either have two things. You can have a high-quality show that wraps up pretty quickly, 1 to 3 seasons, or you can have longevity. And, not every show is going to be great. Not every season is going to be great. So, that's sort of the thing about that, is, like, lots of times in life, and I've touched on this before, but if you have longevity, you don't really have quality. And so that's sort of that, it's, one of those big sort of debates. Would you rather have this quality thing or quantity of long lasting, or like, would you have something with finality? And I've gotten back and forth, and I think other series do things well. I think Mob Psycho does finality well. I think that, Dragon Ball used to do longevity pretty well. I think that if they're gonna animate more of Super and stay true to the manga, I think that it'll be pretty good. I think they do pretty well in longevity, but I think that's where, we sort of get to this dividing line of, hey, okay, is this isekai show going to go on for 10 seasons? And like, yeah, you might flip it on every once and now and then and try to keep up, but it might get too much. Or is it going to say, hey, we're going to shoot for 4 or 5, seasons, try to make things solid and say, this is it, I mean, do you have any final thoughts on the isekai?
No, absolutely. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so Naruto or Bleach, and why?
Oh man, this is such a hard choice because I think I've gone back and forth on this over time. I would say Bleach I favored initially more, and I would say part of this was influenced by games. Going back to other media and how it influenced people's opinions of it. We used to have this one game on the original Nintendo DS that, back then you could play multiplayer with other Nintendo DS owners without them having to own the game themselves. Wow. And so there was a group of us that, like, on the school bus, we would just play this all the time. Because, we had long drives. We were some of the first people picked up, so we would just play this game on the way to school or on the way home. And so I think I really developed an interest in Bleach, even though I think I cumulatively watched more of the Naruto anime and followed the story a little bit better. But I found the appeal of Bleach's characters to be more interesting and a little more adult, and I think that was why I think that's why I would say Bleach overall, even though I think Naruto, forgive me, fellow Bleach fans, I would say Naruto is better done and a better told story overall.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I definitely like Naruto. Obviously, it's my favorite anime of all time, but it's more of a, like you were saying, for you, kind of Bleach is kind of ingrained in your, like, childhood. Right. And that's sort of me with my teenage years in Naruto. Like, I followed Naruto from when I was about, 13, 14 years old, started watching it, and ever since then, like, I blazed through all of the regular Naruto, and then I started watching Shippuden, and like I kept up with it weekly for the dub for a while, and then I just kind of like said, all right, well, I need to finish it, and so I gave in to watching sub, and so I watched it the last 70 episodes in subtitle, and it's just always been my number one anime, and so it's hard to sort of like say, well, I think objectively, we might get into this, but Cowboy Bebop I did a video on how it's objectively the best, anime of all time. In my personal opinion, I gotta go with Naruto. Like, it's not so much as like, do I think that Naruto is, more quality or higher quality or anything. I just think that, for me, it's a little bit more impactful. And I'm always going to say, well, Naruto, because it sort of started this whole, anime journey, and I need to do a video on it, but it's, it's coming. It's coming.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, too, I used to get the Shonen Jump manga back when they would publish, like, monthly magazines and send them to the U.S., and that really influenced, I make art, I sell art, I love, the creation process in general, and Bleach characters were, other than Pokemon, like, Bleach is a show that I drew a lot from, like, especially when you got to characters like Grimmjow and a lot of the characters they started developing around that arc. Their designs are just so interesting to me versus, like, this is not a criticism of Naruto by any means, but because they do have unique characters, but they're very clear stylistically that this is probably the Naruto universe, whereas, like, Bleach really goes out there sometimes with some of their designs.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely, like I'm saying, that's a good point, because, it sort of touches on an aspect larger than just watching a TV show. Like, that was your life, like, you drew as part of your passion, your hobby, and so, like, that really kind of influenced you in a greater way than just like, oh, I like that show,
Right.
And so I think that, that's a fair assessment of, like, being aware of your own personal biases, and that's why I always tell someone, okay, well, this anime, here's why I like it. Here are the, objective reasons why it's good, and then here why I personally find it to be more favorable than other anime. And I think that's a good thing when you can sort of, like, delineate between the two. Did you have anything else? Okay. What do you think is the best objective anime? Oh, great. Versus what's your personal favorite? Okay, so I did get it.
Yeah, perfect timing. So I'm torn on this. Disclaimer, I haven't actually finished Cowboy Bebop. I do like the points you made in the video, and I suspect if I finished it, I would agree with you. But I've seen a lot of the other ones that people say are, the best of all time. And of the ones I've seen, I would say that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is what I would give that award to. Now, my personal favorite anime... that's really hard because I think I have some very heavy recency bias in what I've been watching. Hell's Paradise, I really have enjoyed that, but it's only been one season. I've really enjoyed Black Clover. That's one of the shows that I've probably watched the furthest. Same with Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan.
But is Bleach not factoring into the equation?
It's funny because I think it's just been so long that it same with Naruto. Like, I've watched massive amounts of them, or Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, but it always feels like anime that are slightly newer to me feel like they're more of a favorite.
Yeah.
I guess in this moment, I would say that if you really made me choose today, I'd say my favorite is Hunter x Hunter, and I haven't finished that, and that answer is very subject to change as well. Like, I'm in the Chimera Ant arc, but I think it does a really good job of having a really interesting cast of characters and having a really fun character progression, a really clear character progression of like, Gon isn't just the strongest person, and he's gonna lose a lot, and like over time he will get better. But I would say of the anime I watched when I was a kid, it would definitely be Bleach. And I think because for like Pokemon, I enjoyed the video games more than the anime, and like for Yu-Gi-Oh, I enjoyed the card game a lot, but the anime was just kind of all over the place for me, right? So I think childhood Bleach, current Hunter x Hunter, but ask me again in a month.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, that's a good take. I mean, Hunter x Hunter for me personally, not my favorite, but I can see why people like it. I think it's the pacing slow, so it's not really one of my things. But I definitely, and you could probably like hit me over the head with Naruto and be like, wham, 700 episodes.
Right.
But like for Naruto, it just didn't feel like that, right? Like I think that it was always sort of building to at least something. Like you always had some sort of fights, but in Hunter x Hunter, it just feels like, I mean, there are certain things where like the build up isn't really exactly worth it, because they'll do like one brief fight, quick thing, and then they'll just like, let's go build some more characters for another 20 episodes. It's like, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with that. So, but I think that that's a good take because I know that objectively it's pretty well written. So
yeah, and I think we're in a really, I dare say we're in a golden age of anime. Like there are a lot of recent shows that only have a season or two that I'm like, yeah, when this finishes, I could really see that being a lot of people's like best of all time. A lot of people really appreciated the Dark Trio, right? Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, Hell's Paradise. A lot of people have been waiting to see how Attack on Titan finishes, and I think that could understandably be a lot of people's favorite. But yeah, we're just blessed with a lot of good options right now.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that we've already gone over my favorite Naruto, and then objectively, I did a video on Cowboy Bebop. So, okay, so we kind of got through that. Is there one isekai anime that you would pick for me? Could you sell me on watching isekai as a whole?
Well, you've already seen the one that I would have assumed you would like the most, and you're actually the one who told me about it since you watched Cheat Skill first.
Yeah.
I would say if you only watched season 1 of SAO, that you would like it. I think the plot overall...
I've seen it.
Yeah, I can't... I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Did you like season 1? Were you a fan?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that SAO was good. I think that it had a pretty solid start as far as season 1 goes, and I think that really kind of fell off because it just felt like he just kept going through this same thing in the second half of season 1, where like he just kind of restarted the game, and he like, I know it was a different game, but at the same time it was like, okay, now you're going back, and it's like, okay, well, he's kind of doing the same thing, and I know that Asuna, I think that's her name, was like trapped the whole time, so that kind of felt kind of like, oh, well, when is he going to rescue her? And so that sort of like took the... But I did like the part, you know, where it kind of like was influencing the real world. Hopefully, you know, I won't spoil anything, even though it's a 10-year-old anime. But, you know, it sort of was influenced in the real world at the end there. So I think that that's pretty interesting. And I like the premise. You know, I think the first 13 episodes really super solid. Like one of the greatest starts, you know, as far as these guys go. Probably like the best. Very interesting, but you know, in my opinion, I think that SAO beyond that, the first season was that was not really my thing, you know.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of what I would have liked to have seen would have been how that influenced the real world more.
Yeah,
like I don't mind that they went back into more games in the future, and there were some interesting characters and plot points in there, but because it felt like they were just copy pasting like what had already happened, and there wasn't as big of an impact on the real world as they tried to make it out to be, like, you know, it's kind of interesting to see the evolution of the genre, because I do think they were one of the first to really do it in a mainstream way. So maybe now, if SAO was made today, they would have done it differently. It's hard to say.
Yeah, no, it's good, and you know, I'm thinking that SAO doesn't really have. Does it have a? It's not a light novel per se. It's a web novel or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure offhand.
I think it has something different. So I think that adaptation maybe influenced the pacing and things like that, you know, part of its time. But yeah, okay, so SAO, yeah, pretty solid first season. Beyond that, meh, but okay. All right, so so this is funny. Do you have a favorite romance anime, and why do you watch romance anime in general?
Yeah, it honestly just changed, and it goes back to the start of the conversation that I really, really liked The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, because I think it has a very uncommon for anime take on the romance genre, though it is a little slow, so I'll acknowledge those of you who are in the early stages, like definitely finish it out, because I think they do a great job of developing the characters in a way that I really didn't expect. Like, I've also really liked oh gosh, what's the anime where they play music?
Your Lie in April.
Your Lie in April is such a good anime. I think that was one of my favorites at one point, as was Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai.
Yeah.
Both of those tremendous anime, amazing storylines. I don't want to get too deep into them because I don't know if I could without spoilers, but highly recommend The Angel Next Door. I really like that the romance actually like builds over time, and that future seasons could revolve around a future state of that being the case or not being the case between these two characters. So I think it adds some intrigue and plot development that, you know, for a lot of romance anime, they're just kind of like, oh, season 2, we're still not acknowledging this clearly obvious thing. Like, I think Attack on Titan, obviously not a romance anime, but one of the most frustrating things for, you know, people who shipped, you know, Mikasa and Eren is like, well, what really happened there? Why are they still into each other, if at all? How does Eren even feel about her? Like, that was never clear. And that can be really unsatisfying.
Yeah, for that, I feel like they did 30 seconds in one episode about Mikasa crying about Eren, and I think that was all we got. So it's like, hey, sorry, brother, you're going to have to wait for another 6 months until they give you maybe 1 minute of development between those two. But yeah, I think that... those are very solid reasons to like that show. And I'm not saying I won't watch it. I'm definitely going to give it, you know, the full look at, you know, the full season watch. But I think that, you know, for me, I just get in these periods of like, man, I just need some action or something, you know. But I do love romance anime, and it's like I did a whole video on it, of course. And I recommend these all the time. But, you know, to hear you say, you know, Your Lie in April, man, I think that we always have such different tastes in anime, which is a great thing. But also, you know, it's kind of weird because it's like, you know, I sort of am a very bad stickler about things, and it's, you know, and it's honestly just a gut feeling sometimes. Like, you'll recommend me these anime, and I'm like, I don't want to watch it right now. Just give it a little time, let it marinate, and then something else. Like I see a reel about it on TikTok or whatever, and it's like, you should watch this anime. It's like, yeah, Travis told me to watch that. and then I finally like, okay, whatever, I'll watch it. And then it's like, oh man, that was really, really good. Like Jujutsu Kaisen,
Yeah.
I remember one of the first, things we talked about ever as, friends was anime. And like the first week you were like, hey man, you would really like Jujutsu Kaisen. I heard it's like blowing up right now. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to watch it. Year later,
right.
watch it. Oh my gosh. I was like, man, this is solid. I was like, dang.
Gosh, yeah.
I was like, and I texted you and I was like, oh wow, this is a really great show. And you were like, oh yeah. And then I was like, yeah, I can't believe that I I rejected you and your recommendation. And it's not that I personally, even have, reject your stamp of approval. I always, hold it up in definitely in a high stature. But I think that for me, it's just I get into these moods of like, I just can't sit down and watch something right now that like I'm not really ingrained into. And so I have to go through like certain motions and motives, but I always keep it in the back of my mind,
Yeah, and I think that's the case for not just anime, but shows in general. Like, we really are in a golden age of television. There's more content than anyone could ever watch in a lifetime, even if that was all they did. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when friends give you recommendations, it's not like you don't value their referrals and don't want to watch it. It's like, well, you have to kind of weigh, like, versus the things I already know I want to watch. Like, what have they told me, does that make it urgent enough that I want to watch it now? And then I think, time of year and genre kind of that I want to watch varies by mood, right? Like, I don't always want to watch, super gory, dark anime all the time, and I also don't want to watch, like, filler episodes sometimes. It really just depends,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Romance anime is, to get back to the sort of the core, but yeah, romance anime is great, and that's what I'm saying is like, eventually I probably will finish July and April, or what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that to answer your other question with that, part of the reason I like romance anime, and I think this ties into what you're going to say, is like, I like character development, right? And I think romance anime, for the romance to be satisfying, those characters have to grow as a couple, right? Like, plenty of anime do, there's a ton of anime tropes, and you can definitely watch other anime for different reasons. But I think if you're watching romance specifically, that's sort of what you're hoping to see and kind of experience vicariously. Even if there are struggles, like, they overcome them, and like, you kind of, you don't necessarily live vicariously through them, but you do definitely experience like the satisfying plot points of like, oh, are they finally going to acknowledge their love for each other? Are they finally going to kiss? Are they finally going to learn like how to have satisfying like social interactions in a group? Like, will their friends, accept them as a couple, right? And these are really interesting, super relatable to life things that, I think is part of why we, part of why we like watching shows in general, is just to really see that like satisfying moment of like, been waiting for this and it's finally here and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, you have to, if you're watching some sort of romance anime, you got to expect something to happen. Like, I think that's sort of what you're trying to get at is like, brother, can we see something happen? Like, I mean, I understand that it's hard to sort of, and people, back in the old days, anime just in general had poor pacing because, it was a different time back then. It was okay for the pacing not to be the great, because, once you had a show, you wanted to lengthen it as long as possible. But now, it's more like about creating quality stuff. And like, yeah, you might release it a year or two later, but people have other stuff to watch, so it's not going to be all that bad. But I think that, if you got a romance anime, you got to have something happen. Like I say, for me, I like a little spice in my romance. So I think that Rent a Girlfriend has that sort of quality for me. But I like these other anime that you're saying that, it has a slow burn. I think from Me to You, that was sort of, 2 seasons, and then at the very end, they kind of get together. So I think that's good. And then, like I said, July and April, I'm probably going to watch that. And, I think that it's just like, I always get back to this thing of like you and I having these like sort of almost star-crossed, preferences, and we're like, we meet in the middle on a lot of things, and like especially shonen, we sort of cross, and then like we see isekai, and you're like, oh, I like this, and I'm like, man, I hate that genre. But then also, you say, oh, well, what about this romance anime? And like, of course, the only one that you like is the one that I don't like, right? And so I think that's funny because even people that are so sort of on the same mind path, thinking ways, the same airways, that we differ in that fact. I think that's kind of funny. But okay, so let's do a little bit of a speed round because we're almost going to hit an hour. So we'll knock out a few of these questions, and we'll probably get into some anime that have been recently at the end and hit some spoilers. Is there an anime for everyone, assuming that the person likes watching live action TV movies? Like if they like watching something, let's just say they like watching TV or they like watching movies, do you think that is there an anime that could be recommended to that person?
I think there can be, but I think that some people inherently just don't like the animated mediums.
Sure.
Right? So like, I don't know that you could create very satisfying like documentaries in anime form. Like I don't know that you could create very like a war movie in the same way. Like I think some people like the gritty realism of live action war movies, and an anime is just not good. It's just not that, and that's okay, right? There are some really well done anime movies that show the grittiness of war, like Grave of the Fireflies. Sorry, Studio Ghibli, but it's not the same thing. And I think that being able to watch an anime starts with a willingness to accept the genre, like not the genre, but accept the medium for what it is.
Yeah,
and then I think most people do, right? But there's always going to be some people who don't, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I never really thought about that way. I was thinking about more of, and that's a great answer to the question, but I was thinking about, just someone like one of our friends or something that, generally doesn't watch anime, but maybe if they were willing to watch it. I think that my sort of harping on would be like, is there an anime for anyone that would like it, So, and that would be going as, for me, I just started watching, Birdie Wing, right? And so, like, it's a show about golfing, and so, like, it's an anime, and that's sort of a different thing because, for some people, they might not ever really watch anime because, they don't have anything that, they would like. And it's like, oh, there's this show about that, talks about golfing. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And then there's a show about, explaining things as far as like, I haven't seen it, but Food Wars or something like that, or another sports anime like Blue Lock. Like I could show one of my friends Blue Lock about soccer, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." They, talk about soccer, and I think that, I think there might be an anime out there that if someone was willing to watch anime, I think that they would find something that they like.
I could see that. Like I said, I think there will still be some people who, let's say, they only watch sports and they really are invested in the athletes, but maybe they don't really make time for other types of shows. Like, maybe they would like anime, but they really probably just don't want to prioritize that. It's kind of like a lot of us have passing interests that we just, don't really invest time in, and we're just sort of okay with that trade-off.
Sure.
But I think if anyone's willing to watch an anime, I think they can definitely find something for them. Yeah,
no, that's a good point, for sure. Okay, so this is funny. What's your favorite anime trope?
Oh, man. This is basic boy in me. I really think just overcoming adversity in general is like an interesting trope. And it's more of like a theme maybe than a trope, if that's what you're getting at and you really want the tropes.
Either one, it doesn't matter.
But I think that, or if it had to be like a smaller trope, I kind of enjoy, maybe not to like the tsundere or dere extreme, but like the moment of like embarrassment when a character like reveals their feelings of romantic love for another and then doesn't get the response they're expecting, so they kind of like scream a little bit, freak out, and they're like, I didn't say that, Yeah. I think that's a really kind of cute, kind of funny trope.
Sure. Yeah, the tsundere is very, it's there for a reason. I think it's done right sometimes. There are certain characters that, do that correctly. And that's funny that you say that, like the sort of the embarrassment thing, but also kind of like tries to be a little bit, soft sometimes, but then they kind of like do away with that really quickly and change tone pretty fast. I think that's a good trope in anime, and like I said, I've kind of harped on that before, so I won't talk too much. But okay, lightning round. Who is your favorite anime character and why?
I'll give you two. So number one is solidly Gabimaru recently from Hell's Paradise.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I really like his character motivation, and it kind of makes you question it a little bit. And I'll try not to get too spoilery, but I just think it's super relatable. Of like, can a man or woman who's like done the unthinkable achieve redemption? And like that's an amazing like character theme in my mind, and just like seeing him wrestle with that internally is so good.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think Gabimaru is very interesting, and I think that it's like, in anime we see a lot of people that kind of are, they almost like are unredeemable, and then they just nonchalantly sort of get pushed into that role of like, oh, well, I want this character to be good, so now you're going to be good for no real apparent reason, like Vegeta almost.
Right.
I think that his turn was just a little bit too, easy, kind of say. Like, there was no like, oh, well, you didn't redeem yourself. A little bit, I will say, obviously, once he, fights Majin Buu, that's sort of his redemption thing ultimately. But still, even then, he was never really a good guy, per se. They just wanted him to fight with Goku, on the Z Fighters team. So I think, that Gabimaru does, his character is really good, that, he has that motivation that I think is valid, I would say. All right. Okay, so name a dubbed anime that you enjoy, and name a subtitled anime that should never get an English dub. Oh, man.
Ooh, a good dubbed anime. I actually think Naruto is a good dub.
Yeah.
I liked Naruto's dub a lot. I would say excellent dub. If I remember correctly, I also liked the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood dub. That's been a while, so don't, grain of salt with that one.
Yeah.
Subtitled anime that should never get an English dub. I think, Psycho-Pass, interestingly enough.
Wow.
Right.
I watched it in dub.
Really?
Yeah.
You liked it?
I liked it.
Okay, good. Yeah. I think that one just, I worried maybe there were like localization issues or something, because it was a little bit lower budget, but it was such a good show that I was worried that, maybe without using text to translate, that just the English words would be insufficient for some of the themes.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I didn't really think about that, because I just watched it with dub, because that was back in my, days that I really didn't care too much to watch subtitles unless I had to. So that's very interesting that you would say that. I think the dub did a good job. Personally, I wouldn't know,
Yeah.
I think that the actual voice acting was good. So maybe that's where I sort of come into play, but that's very interesting that you chose that. Did you have anything else? Okay. But I will say, for a good dubbed anime, obviously Cowboy Bebop. I think that Mob Psycho is really good dubbed. It's not bad subbed, but like I much prefer watching the dubbed version of Mob Psycho, and they do a great job. Also, My Hero Academia, that's a really good dubbed anime, and I think that there's some other ones, but I think those two kind of stick out right now off the top of my head. Akame ga Kill was good dubbed anime, I think, and then there are actually a few subtitled anime that should never get a dub. One is Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, honestly.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And then second, I would say Oshinoko. It's new. It has a dub. It's the most brain-shattering thing in the world, because I watched it completely in sub, and I was like, I don't want to watch this sub, but I will give it a chance just to see a clip of it. It was the worst casting I've ever seen in my life. The way that the characters were casted into these voices, I was like, it made no sense. I just I was like, how can you get this character and then get this, English speaking person that sounds nothing like the original character, and I'm like, it's just it just like gives me the willies or whatever, and it's just like, oh, that one should never have gotten a dub at all ever. I'm very sad about that, but we'll move on. Okay, so what is the anime at the top of your to watch list?
So I need to finish the last few episodes of season 2 of Classroom of the Elite.
Oh yeah, that's good.
I love that show. I stopped watching to watch some of the newer stuff this season, but I'm still really excited for it.
Oh, it's fire.
And then I'm torn a little bit. I think I'd like to start Scarlet Nexus. Really obscure for perhaps mainstream anime watchers, but it's based on the video game or ties into the video game of the same name. And I really enjoyed the game. I thought it had a potentially very interesting story, so I at least want to get the first couple of episodes in, see if they did a good job or not, and hopefully so, because I found the premise of the game quite interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I saw that that you talked about that, and then it got an anime adaptation. So yeah, I might have to watch that. I didn't even realize, kind of like, I think you said something about it, but I just kind of forgot. But okay, great. Yeah, I think that you said you really enjoyed that game, especially like the sort of the storytelling.
Yeah. I won't. There's not a great way to talk about it without tremendous spoilers for anyone who's just not started it. And the story sort of hinges on those spoilers. But I would encourage anyone to just look up the trailer for it if you're interested. And I think that'll give you all you need to know about the game.
Okay, so Scarlet Nexus, and then you said finish up
Classroom of the Elite.
Yeah, very solid anime. I love that show. I need to do a video on it. Okay, so name a series that you read the manga for, and was there any anime that had a better manga than the actual anime?
So I used to religiously follow all the Shonen Jump manga.
Oh, okay.
So in the early 2000s especially, it was I was reading Bleach and Naruto and One Piece and everything that was there at the time. And I thought at the time that both the Naruto manga, which was well ahead, and One Piece were better than the shows. I never really got that into One Piece, the show.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the manga, and I remember it influenced me to draw several scenes from there as a kid. I don't know why the show just didn't click for me as well. And I think I've also had a natural aversion to shows with filler. And so if I watch one of those shows, I'll usually look up a filler list so I can skip it around those episodes, which I know is sacrilegious to some people, but it's fine. It's what I do.
No, I mean, I think that you should skip filler, in my opinion, because it's like you're not actually reading what the author intended. He's just like filling stuff in that doesn't really have anything to do with the story, and that's not. I mean, if you want to watch more, hey, go for it. I don't care if you watch filler, but I mean, what were you gonna say?
No, yeah, I'd fully agree. I think that's honestly where you sometimes get some of the worst seasons. Like Bleach specifically, I'm like, why did you decide to just make an entire arc that nobody cares about Quincy's, right? Or with Naruto, it's I guess we were saying earlier, it was sort of the product of its time, but you really didn't have to go and do these things, even though I do think Naruto did it better than a lot of shows has done it. But a lot of times it just gets it lacks the depth and intrigue that the show has on the regular.
Yeah, no, I definitely, for sure. You can definitely tell that, he's like, oh, Naruto, the thing was we're going on a mission that we will never talk about ever again, and it will be about this weird, crazy jutsu that is so OP that Naruto has to incorporate into his Rasengan, and then he'll never use it again. Great.
Yeah.
And then sometimes he'll die, and it's like, oh, great, that happened. And then he'll get reborn because he's OP. And I was like, okay, so that was pretty crazy. One of the things they did for the filler was the 500th episode special. I thought that was pretty interesting. Looking back on it now, I don't like it, but I thought at the time it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I was unbeknownst to the filler things in anime. But yeah, this is very interesting. The fairy tale manga, vastly superior to the anime.
Okay.
It's a lot more grittier. It actually has more blood and if fairy tale even has blood, maybe I can't remember, but it's very gritty. has a lot of cussing, honestly, which is weird.
Interesting.
But then also like it's very, more. I just feel like impactful because like something about the anime is like it's very almost silly and like the art style maybe doesn't really incorporate kind of like the serious tone that you want, but then like you see a character show up in Fairy Tail and it's like to the rescue and it's like, oh my gosh, it was just so much more impactful than you ever thought. Like it couldn't be, because like you go from in a manga you read and then you see one panel, then you go to the next panel and then it's just there, like it hits you all at once. Whereas like an anime, it's like the theme music gets in and they're like introducing, it's like but yeah.
That does remind me of another manga that I'll have to look it up in my books really quick, but there were several like smaller manga back in the day, just like never had a chance of ever seeing the light of day. Like Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles is one that comes to mind. It's by a pretty well-known studio named Clamp, right? That they created, they kind of had their own like Clamp universe, like before that was like a really popular thing. And it got like a 1 or 2 season like anime spin-off that just wasn't that well done. But the manga is truly excellent. Like it's a really well told manga series that not a lot of people got to know about just because it wasn't as popular and mainstream back then. But if you're looking for something that's not like 80s old, but it is still really well done with a really good story, highly recommend looking into some of the stuff Clamp did, like Tsubasa.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Never heard of that before. I have to give it a read. But I mean, I think manga in general, very complicated topic, to say the least, as far as like, what's true to the original intent versus like the art style, and versus like, well, in anime it's just easier to watch, but then, in manga you can speed read like through One Piece and like skip all the filler, and, there's a lot of different stuff there, but yeah, no, I think that's pretty much all for my questions. So, I appreciate you coming on my channel and talking. I mean, is there anything that you want to say before you go?
No, absolutely. I appreciate you having me today. Like I said, definitely check out, Scarlet Nexus or Tsubasa or some of the other content. If you are a gamer, highly recommend. If you like anime and you haven't tried some of the Naruto games, I think they do a really solid job.
Ultimate Storm.
Of telling the story of Naruto in a really interactive and fun way. But yeah, other than that, I just appreciate you having me today. Yeah,
no, it was definitely a fun time. I mean, I love talking about anime, and we went on and on for over an hour. So I think that's definitely a good conversation. That you always bring new perspectives to me that I never would have thought of in a million years. But hopefully I dropped some knowledge on your head today.
Oh, absolutely, always.
But no, I appreciate it. As far as anything else, guys, just check out all my different videos. I mean, I've got tons. I'll try to put some in the intro and in the outro, put some cards in there for you. Pretty much it. As always, this is Eagle-Eyed Samurai signing off.
Perfect.